So I think what we're going to do today is sort of talk about the various types of wallets first, and each one of us are kind of go over and give our opinions on the various types. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with all of the different types, but that's kind of the goal. So we'll start with full node wallets. That's probably what most everyone who's familiar with them are the most familiar with. I think obviously the prolific example is Bitcoin QT. The thing about a full node wallet is it has the entire blockchain from a actual network security perspective is probably the most secure in the sense of it can actually prove that the transactions are coming from that the transactions are valid a lot better than some of the other technologies because they have some level of trust. It's basically the most trustless solution, I guess is the right way to put it. So we'll let Ryan take over here and talk about them a bit.
So just really quick, show of hands, are you guys developers? Like 2 out of 8, okay. So mostly we're normal users. So when it comes to thinking about these wallets, what you really want to think about with Bitcoin is who can take your money, right? Because all of these wallets will let you spend your money the way you want to spend it, but they have different security models when it comes to when someone else wants to spend your money. And this varies from most of these, like full node wallets, SVB wallets, mobile desktop wallets, and exchange wallets. Well, actually, let's not exchange, just mobile desktop, full node, SVB. Anyone who has access to your computer can spend your money, right? So anybody who wrote software that runs in your computer, anybody who broke out of your browser sandbox for some reason, anybody who maybe you downloaded something thinking it was a movie and it was not a movie, things like that. All of those people can spend your money too. Plus, your wife, your girlfriend, your kid. Your friend who isn't really a very good friend, who's standing next to your computer or your phone while you're in the bathroom. All those guys can spend your money with all those types of wallets. The hosted exchange wallet has the same problem, which is anyone who's authenticated to your account can spend your money. So anybody who's sees it open in a browser or things like that. But it is the additional problem of the counterparty risk, where the exchange themselves can lose your money to hackers, to bad employees, maybe just to bad backup practices, or it can be taken out of the account, or it can be used by an attacker. So exchange wallets, that doesn't matter, I'm in the visual aid, have the same threat profiles as the desktop and mobile wallets, with the additional threat of if the counterparty fails to perform in some way, your money's just gone. And Gox lost $500 million of other people's money, so this is a very, very real threat. So when I think about wallets, what I really want to think about is how do you make sure that the human has authorized what the device is trying to do, right? And that's why I build in multi-signature, where the device has one set of keys and generates the transaction, but the transaction is not valid unless it's countersigned, and it has to be countersigned by a different device. And so the normal flow that I recommend for users is you have a paper wallet, which is a different attack profile. The paper wallet, it's totally compromised when someone touches it or takes a picture of it, but it's safe in all other circumstances. You have the paper wallet as a second wallet that can't spend the funds itself, but it can countersign transactions from the normal wallet. So you have possession of your funds. You're the only person who can access both of those wallets. So you can feel pretty safe there. And then for convenience, we have a web service where you can upload the transaction and we'll countersign it. And what we do there is we do the same thing your bank does with the debit card transaction, where we risk score it. Low risk transactions we immediately countersign. If you're sending $10 to a BitPay merchant, we're not going to stop you. But if you're buying a Maserati, maybe we're going to call you first, make sure that you're actually at the Maserati dealership. And so by reaching to the user out of band of the device that's trying to make the payment with a phone call or an email or using an OTP or like Google Authenticator on a different device, we can ensure that payments are authorized by the person instead of just by whoever's touching the device. And we think that's pretty important. also pretty important is when we do have a reason to believe that a wallet is compromised, we can just freak out. Have you ever had the experience where you're maybe a little bit drunk and you're maybe a little bit in Vegas and you take out too much money at the ATM and your bank freaks out? We can do that too. We just say, listen, for the next 24 hours, we're going to call you until we get you. We're going to email you until we get you. And we're not going to sign anything until we get you because we think something's wrong. And so when you look at wallet types, I urge you to think about who can spend from that wallet really. Who wrote software that runs on that device, who has physical access to that device, and what those policies are. And maybe instead of just, saying, I'm going to have, a small amount of funds in a spending device that I'm just going to assume is insecure, and a large amount of funds in the paper wallet, instead, maybe have different keys with different policies and have a relationship between those keys. Makes it a little bit easier and is still actually theoretically at least as secure.
So, but what you describe is a very classic cybersecurity solution, which is layered response, right? The reality here is that at the essence of a Bitcoin transaction is your private key. And then there's the second half of it, which is the formation of the instruction to the blockchain. And so you want to protect the private key, and you want to protect the formation of the instruction. If, for example, I could write a piece of malware that every time you type in an address, what it shows on the screen is the address you want to send it to, but the address it actually sends it to is the one I control, and it sends it to my account somewhere. They're really interesting aspects of how malware in a computer or in an application can affect a transaction. So the real challenge is to approach this with the very classic set of tools that have been used for a long time in cybersecurity, but sometimes to not great effect. And providing an appropriate layered approach in security that takes into account both the cybersecurity aspects of your device and then the physical security aspects of the other attributes. It's great, for example, if you can bind your device into the transaction, the fact that you live in, an apartment in a neighborhood with a guard and, your 2 schnauzers to protect the front door, all that investment that you have is now part of the protection of your transaction. It's very different than using the public terminal in the lounge at the Marriott, which is probably not the best place to do $1 million Bitcoin transaction on their computer because who knows what's running on that computer. And so one of the interesting aspects is how to incorporate all the normal things that we do as humans, because if this morning everybody in here was sent an email that was designed to collect your private key, and if you clicked on that attachment, we stole your keys. Do you know we didn't, right? And that's the interesting challenge, is you just don't know. On the other hand, if you left your phone last night at the bar or wherever you happen to be, and you don't have it this morning, you're probably not in this room. You're probably down there trying to figure out how to fetch your phone because you physically know it's missing. And so the binding of physicality into these components is really, I think, an important process in it. And I think that as we look at the different wallet types, I think that's one of the characteristics that becomes important in this. It's very early on in sort of the normal process. I think we're still seeking for what is the right consumer experience across the board that's simple, easy, and your friends can explain to you. You don't need to meet somebody who understands the inner workings of Bitcoin to explain how you should or shouldn't treat your private key. The next step is really the consumerization of these technologies, and that's the real challenge. It's a mixture of all of them. It's a mixture of both client side and server side. There's some really interesting characteristics. The obvious advantage of a exchange or server side wallet is there's a customer service department. You can call somebody, and supposedly there's a bunch of professional people taking care of your private key. Now, they can do it in a way where there's no risk that even the super administrator at an exchange wallet server has access to your private key. It's easy to construct. It's been done for years. They're called HSMs, or hardware security modules. If you're working with an exchange wallet in the sky that doesn't have an HSM, then we should understand that we should put pressure on those players in the industry to install an HSM. Why? Because finally your password that you log into your account would unlock the key, but only when it's operational inside the little black box, which is an HSM, which is commercial off-the-shelf technology, not expensive. You can buy for any server infrastructure out there. And so now the manipulation of the private key and the formation of the instruction to the blockchain is done in a tamper-resistant space that's independent from the super administrator of that site. So even the CEO and CTO with full admin rights can't go down and use your private key, because they actually don't have it unless you've supplied your password to that HSM. Even better if you've supplied your challenge response to that HSM so that it's not a password they could sniff on their network. It's a one-time use set of credentials to unlock the permissioning of that key in the infrastructure. These are really well understood cybersecurity capabilities. They're part of some of what the Trusted Computing Group has been about for many years in setting standards for hardware security both on the client side and server side. And these are tools that can be used to really change the paradigm or the risk equation. So I don't have to trust as much the server infrastructure. I can just use it, and they can provide me with a service, and therefore I can get customer support and all the things that go with that. Or I can execute that full transaction on my client side with it, again, properly executing in a black box so it's protected and it's insulated or isolated from a piece of malware on the client side. And there are a number of technologies to create isolation on a client PC so it looks as though you had a completely dedicated device that was doing your Bitcoin transactions, similar to, let's say, a Trezor hardware wallet.
So I find that actually really interesting. The trusted computing modules in consumer tech, is it actually possible, and if so, is anyone working on making it so that you can have your Bitcoin keys somewhere where they can't be copied out by malware? They can only be used to sign transactions locally?
So there are two ways to do that today. One, the existing infrastructure that's in place on about 1 billion PCs has the ability to hold a private key, but the cryptographic processes that are available are things like SHA-1 and RSA. And so you can do a challenge response against that private key, but it would not be the private key that you think of as your Bitcoin private key. It would be a private key used to seal your Bitcoin private key.
Got it.
And so actually that would be amazingly effective today for an online wallet where it would handshake with an HSM black box, and then only when my machine was present could my private key be used. And that's a technology that's called Trusted Platform Module. Is very broadly available in the PC marketplace today. Every business class laptop, desktop, and workstation since 2006 has this capability in the box. And as of January 1st, 2015, Microsoft's putting on everything consumer. So all your consumer PC platforms you buy next year will have a universal capability in the same manner. The second technology is a set of technologies called Trusted Execution Technologies. And if you look inside, let's say a modern Intel platform, one you've purchased in the last couple of years, it has the ability to form an isolated hardware execution container, which absolutely could both hold the private key, process the signing transaction on the Bitcoin protocol, and supports the concept of a secure display with which you can construct secure input. So it has tamper-resistant pin entry as well, so that even if you tried to put malware to capture the mouse clicks or your screen touches or your keyboard input, you wouldn't be able to steal the pin number. And so what you actually have is the equivalent of an independent external hardware device for the transaction process. And you wouldn't build a whole wallet in that. You'd just build the supporting characters for the transaction in that, and then you can use anybody's wallet software to have the appropriate interfaces and support and branding and all the things in formation of the transaction. But that's absolutely possible. There are probably about 200 to 250 million PC platforms already in existence, and it's a technology that ships standard on everything going forward.
So 2015 and on, we can actually get to the point where we expect that that private keys are only handled in hardware environments, and it'll no longer be possible for malware to steal wallets.
Absolutely. I think that technologies are now in the platforms that if the industry and the ecosystem and the players in the wallet space want to support those capabilities, that absolutely. And I do think it's very important in this community that this is something that's not a requirement but an option, right? So you can still have exactly the same wallets you have today. You can have them on every device you have today. You might just choose yourself to say that I'll set certain limits or conditions, or I mean, I think the aspects of what you're doing where we understand, more about the transaction, and then we set certain conditions, say, okay, if you're spending $10, who cares? You're spending $1,000, maybe I only want to see that transaction from your machine. Spending $100,000, well, I want to see 3 machines and your mother-in-law approving that transaction before it actually gets spent, right? Now, there's some interesting opportunities, I think, as to what consummates the condition of who's spending the money.
My mother-in-law would never approve a transaction. Would never happen.
Not worth $100,000.
She doesn't even approve travel. This is an interesting idea. I really like protecting against malware for the default use case. To me, it's really terrifying that for the average consumer, in order to make Bitcoin as safe as their bank, you have to give them a whole list of security instructions and caveats, and you have to basically train them up to be a security expert. And most people do not have patience for that. They really don't.
So can I tell a training story? Because this is just so much fun. So how's training going? How many people, when you got your driver's license and you're taking your first driver's ed class, and it was on wet or icy conditions when stopping, what are you supposed to do? Most of us are old enough to remember, pump the brakes, remember? Okay, yeah. So how'd that go? Not so well. So now they've invested in this great automated robotics technology called ABS. Fantastic. Now you just step on the brakes. You don't have to pump them at all, right? And the car goes and slows down. Well, now it's gotten even better, because instead of waiting for a million years of evolution to have, more limbs grown on your body, now there's a computer that independently ABSs each independent brake, trying to keep your butt on the road while you're steering in an icy condition, getting off the exit ramp way too fast, and standing on the brakes. Your car will do a really good job of actually keeping you on the road. But that's still not good enough, because at least once a month or so on the news, there's a picture of some car in the front of the, Burger King locally with the caption, "Oh, I hit the gas instead of the brake." Right? So now what we're doing is we've put this radar technology in the front of the damn car that when you're driving along, it says, there's a wall. So we've disconnected the human from the brakes and the gas. Those are just electronic levers now. And the computer goes, take your foot off the gas, put your foot on the brake, and stop before you hit the wall. Oh, so we've completely given up on training the users. We don't even expect them to stop. We're telling the car to avoid hitting solid objects, which is, by the way, a great rule. And we've tossed training out, and we've completely automated the driving experience. It's better, stronger, cheaper, safer. It reduces your insurance rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And every car in the next decade will have this kind of technology. So we should take a note from the automotive industry that training users, and we're pretty focused on that. I mean, mom and dad actually drive you around for 6 months in the car, trying to train you as a user. It's very funny having both teenagers, one just now driving, the other one's just about to start driving. This training thing is really highly entertaining, but it doesn't work very well. And so the idea that somehow in cybersecurity, we're going to tell everybody to use better, longer, bigger passwords, and please don't click on things, and those attachments and emails from people you don't think you really know, don't click on those. It's just not going very well. We need to automate this process. We need to treat the computer as the robot that it is, and provision it in such a way to assure that it protects us to the best of its ability.
Yeah, but the
app
play
protects itself.
Sorry, go ahead. was going to say, to play devil's advocate, though, I mean, I do agree with what you're saying in theory for the most part and everything, but at the same time, if you're going to completely remove the user from the loop where the software and the systems are completely taken care of, you're kind of shifting trust. You're shifting trust into the system that you're using, that it's doing everything properly. So what happens if the user doesn't know the difference between the fact they're using a secured system versus a non-secured system? So, it doesn't solve all the issues. I mean, it's a great, technology and something I think that we should all look at, enhancing. But
training the user on
it isn't a panacea, right?
Training the user on acquisition through marketing is actually an easier concept. So we've all learned to buy cars with airbags. By the way, that was not an easy task, right? People didn't know whether Volvo was going to work with that campaign or not. And it worked, and it eventually caused the entire industry to shift. And you see the beginnings of efforts now in the device world with people like Samsung Knox and what Dell's been doing in their security and whatever to talk about the fact that the device comes with security built in. It's just really early on days. We're still at the point where people are questioning whether the airbag is killing more people or saving more people. Right? We're just in the earliest stages of securities built into the device.
Right. So the Fiat banking industry kind of already figured this out, right? They really want to protect the user from themselves. They run risk scoring on every transaction that comes through a debit card or a credit card. They look at you at the ATM. They want to make sure it's used. A lot of them are doing facial recognition at the ATMs now. They work really hard to protect you from yourself on debit cards, on credit cards, and it's massively reduced fraud and theft in the banking infrastructure. Most important, though, is they've trained users to stop carrying cash. This is a big deal. I like New York. It's a fun city, got great restaurants, but it's not a city where you want to walk around with $1,000 in cash in your pocket. It really is not. And for a long time, stopping people on the street and taking their money was a very thriving business there. And it's basically disappeared. And it didn't disappear because of anything Rudy Giuliani or Michael Bloomberg did. It disappeared because people just pay for shit with their cards now. And walking up to someone with a gun on the card isn't actually that effective. The ATM's going to be like, hey, listen, this is a really big withdrawal that you're doing. We're not going to let you do it. And so the goal is to get Bitcoin wallets the same place, where Bitcoin wallets right now, they're like walking through Central Park with 20 grand in your pocket. You got to be afraid of every website you click, every person you talk to, everybody you let into your bedroom. And where I want to get to is your Bitcoin wallet cares about you just as much as your bank does, protects you just as much as your bank does, and you can safely recommend Bitcoin to your mom without ever explaining to her private keys.
Very good. Move on to a few questions. Eric?
Sure.
All right.
Hi, I'm Eric. I live here in Austin, and I recently started learning about Bitcoin, very interested in it, but I failed my training already because I already lost quite a lot of money in this Mt. Gox collapse and so forth. So as I was learning about how to use Bitcoin and try and figure it out, the question I have for you today is, what about the part of the transaction in fiat money, let's say dollars or euros or whatever, that you use to then try and buy Bitcoins? What part of the electronic part of when your money is denominated in dollars and what part of that is where, what type of electronic wallet or electronic account should you have to use that to then go try and buy a Bitcoin or trade it with somebody?
So that's an excellent question. I used to run a company called Tradehill. What we did was we helped people exchange dollars for Bitcoins in very large blocks. Our average transaction was over $200,000. We had a lot of hedge fund customers, a lot of venture capitalist customers, and basically every Bitcoin business you've heard of was a customer too. There's no easy answer. And the reason is because Bitcoin does not resemble a check, really. And Bitcoin does not resemble a credit card payment. What Bitcoin resembles is a wire transfer between banks. It's a settlement mechanism, not a payment mechanism. Your wallet, your Bitcoin wallet, is actually a bank. And it can settle directly with other Bitcoin wallets without the use of a third-party service or governance infrastructure. And once that transaction goes through, it's gone. It's like firing a bullet from a gun. And so when you think about that, if you're an exchange and you're helping people get dollars into a bank and then helping them buy Bitcoin to get Bitcoin out, you know for a fact once you've sent that Bitcoin out, it's gone, they have it, you're never getting it back. So when you're dealing with $200,000 transactions, $1 million transactions, you can just require wires, and it's the same, right? You know, a wire is also a bullet from the gun. Once the bank agrees to send the wire, it's gone. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about $5 transactions, $10 transactions, $100 transactions, suddenly the $50 to $100 that a wire costs is not going to cut it, right? Every other method of transmitting fiat other than wire transfers is less final than Bitcoin. And so every Bitcoin service is going to be fighting fraud for their lifeblood. And those costs will be passed on to the consumer. So consumers bear significant costs related to fiat fraud.
So one of the things that's kind of related to your question in the sense that there has actually been some work going on in this regard, and there's a concept called voting pools. And the idea is that, you know, currently that kind of is the problem, is that how do you prove that the exchange actually has what they say that they have of your money, or that if they're going, you know, did it actually get transferred? You don't, you know, you can look at the blockchain and you can think that, okay, well, I saw it show up, but, you know, there's basically, you have no proof that they didn't use it, that they didn't, you know, steal your coins or whatever. So the idea of a voting pool is that essentially, in order for any of these transactions that we're talking about to take place, is that you have a, you know, it's a kind of the decentralized mechanism of the whole Bitcoin infrastructure itself, is that you have to have multiple parties agree that this is a valid transaction and this transaction takes place. And by doing that, you know, if you have, unless, it's just like the 51% attack, unless more than half of the network is not honest, then you can actually stave off some of these unchecked transaction issues.
Are they doing voting pools for US dollars?
No, but I was talking about the other way. You were talking about, that's why I said it's sort of related, right?
Good. Well, closing thoughts, closing comments, and tell me about this.
I did. So we kind of went off a little bit more on security, but as far as wallet types, if you guys want to, if you haven't seen it, you want to take a look. What I have here is actually a paper wallet, and so the idea with this is that whenever you maintain or you get your Bitcoins in your wallet, you print them out, and so underneath this flap right here, if you were to open that up, it actually has your private key printed on this piece of paper, and over here is your public key. So this is the address, you know, where the Bitcoins are actually stored. If you wanted to receive more Bitcoins to this address, then you give them this address, and then that's your private key that you actually use to spend it. And so, you know, you'd want to take this and put it in a fireproof safe or anything. Yes, go ahead.
I work with blockchain, but not Coinbase.
Coinbase actually added the ability here recently to print off paper wallets too. So the thing about, I guess, let me see if I can explain it in a not super technical way, is that the service that you use or whoever actually has your wallet, it's not so much that. What really matters is that the way that you have the coins is that you have a public and private key pair. It's these two pieces of information. The whole thing about the type of wallet and what all the security talk and everything that we were going over is who actually has this? Who has the private key? That's sort of the important part. So if your coins are kept at Mt. Gox or Coinbase or, you know, the current web wallet technologies, most of the time they are the ones that actually have that private key. And what Coinbase, for example, recently added is they allow you to remove it from their wallet. And by remove it, really all that means is they let you have the private key and they no longer track it. That's essentially what it's really doing. But there's nothing really stopping you other than perhaps their policies from, you know, transferring, if you will, coins from one place to the other, because it's not like a real bank per se. It's really just these two pieces of information that comprise your coin.
I would be very, very careful with paper wallets as a non-sophisticated user. A lot of sophisticated users say that paper wallets is like the wave of the future and how to secure.
Well, I don't like them either. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I think they're actually extraordinarily dangerous, and they're dangerous for a few reasons. One, you're usually generating them on the same computer you're managing your other keys with. So that computer, if it's compromised, using the paper wallet's not going to protect you. They already have the private key before you printed it. Right. Two, I've touched it. Now that I've touched it, he really can't be sure. You know, once I open this flap, I can take a picture of it with my phone. I can draft these coins whenever I want. And I can wait until he puts more coins into the wallet, right, and then draft them then. So having this one key to pull money out of a wallet, is dangerous. It's dangerous because someone can take that key. It's dangerous because you could lose it. It's dangerous because the paper can degrade and it won't be scannable anymore.
Right.
Paper wallets are a useful tool within a broader security strategy, but they are a terrible security strategy.
Right, and so, you know, kind of to talk to that is, I actually agree with them that I don't really think paper wallets in and of themselves are a good idea for many of the reasons that he just talked about. The main reason I brought it up is it's a type of wallet, and it's actually commonly touted as a way to do it, and those are some of the issues with it. On the plus side, though, one of the things that it kind of plays into is the idea, one of the things I have up there was talking about the idea of cold storage versus hot storage. Hot storage is where you actually, the private keys are available at any given time, and any of the web wallets, well, I can't speak to all of them, but for the vast majority of the current web wallets, everything is hot. That means if a hacker gets in there and they get all of your funds because everything. And so the idea of a cold is that you only have, it's kind of like, say you have 2 bank accounts, if you will, or maybe you have cash at home that's not in the bank. The only thing if somebody hacks into your bank can get is the money that's in your bank. And that's sort of the idea of the separation between hot and cold storage. Cold storage means that the funds aren't, you know, available. And so that's sort of what, like, one way, I don't think it's the best way, but it is a way, and I think this makes it easy to describe it, is that this is kind of an idea of cold storage. Other than, you know, if somebody gets this piece of paper and takes your private key, and again, assuming that you created the private key to begin with and nobody else has it, but if you're the only one with this private key and it's not on a computer anywhere, the only way that it's going to get stolen is somebody physically gets access to this piece of paper, for example. Whereas if it's a hot wallet, or i.e., in other words, your private keys are available on whatever web wallet or exchange service, or even on your self-computer if you're running a desktop application that has your keys. As long as those keys are available on the machine and it's connected to the internet, you're at risk from a hacker being able to get in there and take everything. If you separate that off and actually make it physically protected, and there are actually other things like, for example, there are physical coins. I don't want to pimp any specific ones, but there's a couple of different ones where they actually have physical coins where it's sort of the same idea as the paper wallet. You know, it's cold storage, but it's actually a coin, like a gold coin, that won't degrade. And there, you know, of course, there's physical theft issues too, but those are the difference.
They make good gifts too for Christmas.
Right.
Cold storage versus hot storage, and that kind of discussion is also something that I would strongly warn against for unsophisticated users. If you don't consider yourself a security professional, if you've never gotten hired as a consultant, I would say that Coinbase has been spot audited recently, and they do have over 98% of their funds in cold storage. So
that's good.
So that's good to say. But the thing about this again is there's still that one process that if that process gets compromised, all the funds are gone. And this is what happened at Gox. Their hot wallet was actually not compromised. They had 2,000 coins in their hot wallet, almost $2 million when they went down. They lost access to their cold storage. So that $500 million that they lost was actually the cold storage that they would have touted as best practice a month before they lost it. Right. This is why I strongly suggest it's not just the mechanism you use to store the key. It's layered policies with different keys stored using different mechanisms that have to interact. If you say, you know, I trust my hot wallet up to this amount and I trust my cold wallet up to this amount, you're in a pretty precarious situation where you could actually lose access to your cold wallet, and then you've lost your life savings. You know, it's not necessarily more secure than the exchange, and it's not necessarily more secure than just having it encrypted on your local disk, especially if you have a hardware module.
It's that the focus on this infrastructure so far has been tremendously on the back office side, the blockchain, the cryptographic associated with that, the concept of a central repository of trust. And now we get to the next piece, and the next piece is how do we adequately protect this infrastructure of a key and the formation of the instructions? Because the problem with any paper wallet is, okay, I have the key. It's protected. It's in my lockbox at home. But now I need to form an instruction. When I want to go form that instruction, I have to take a picture of the QR code, or I have to type in the characters of the password. So if you've got a keyboard logger running on your machine, or a driver that's intercepting the QR codes taken with your camera, my favorite hack ever was told to me by Andrew Nash, who's been a fairly famous person in the payments industry, was back in in the really early days of the online commerce, somebody wrote an app. Turns out your MasterCard and Visa card is an algorithm. So if you add all the characters together, you do the actual formula, you can check that it's a real Visa card number. And it was from back in the days where they couldn't online check the validity of a card number. And so that somebody had written a hack, and all it did was wait for a sequence of 14 characters to match the algorithm. Then what the hack did was send the previous 1,000 characters and the next 1,000 characters and sent it to an email address. And it's a brilliant hack. It was a complete distributed computing performance attack because it just sat there and waited till you typed a credit card number in. And when it typed it, it ignored everything else except when you typed a credit card number in, and then it sent you all the data. And it was hugely successful. And this is like in the early 1990s. And it was one of the very early on sort of card theft things. But you could apply these kind of principles to stealing a QR code or stealing a private key in a really simple manner. And you know, all of us know we've had the little thing that comes up and says, you have an alert, you've gotten a virus because you clicked on the wrong thing. It's just a matter of discovering those. And of course, you know, waiting for antivirus to protect this new modern commerce system is probably not the best plan. So we need to couple this modern commerce model of all sorts of new types and really exciting transactions with a new, better protection paradigm for the user, one where we don't have to train them on what it is, we don't have to explain it, we shouldn't really have to have panels with people who are users to explain what a wallet is. It should just work. And as long as it just works, and so you can give it to your mother-in-law, and your mother-in-law is completely happy because it's not about this new cryptographic algorithm, it's that you get $5 cash back when you click and you buy with Bitcoin. Or pick the mechanism. There's gonna be a reason why when you're sitting in front of your computer screen or you're sitting at a table at a restaurant and you have a choice, Visa, PayPal, and Bitcoin, you pick Bitcoin. And it's not going to be just security or ease of use or it's Bitcoin. It's going to have to be something more. And I think that's the real challenge, is that it's early on in this ecosystem and we have to work really hard to provide a very simple automatic capability that's consistent, that really meets the state-of-the-art understood capabilities that we can deliver in cybersecurity on a consumer-based platform today.
So you've changed my talking points. I'm going to steal that. We've been working so far on this settlement mechanism of here's how cash moves over the internet. Here's how to do a wire transfer for the cost of a penny, right? That's what we've built.
Right.
Is now any computer can do a wire transfer to any other computer for the cost of a penny. That's a back office function. You've never met the person who processes wire transfers at your bank. In fact, it's almost illegal for you to do so. What we need to build now is the front of office function, the thing that interacts with the user, that's fault tolerant, that doesn't mind stupid users, that doesn't mind insecure computers, that'll work well.
So let's coin a term at the Texas Bitcoin Conference. We want to build the silicon and mortar infrastructure, the bricks and mortar infrastructure.
I like it.
Right? Because at the end of the day, your device is your bank. And whether it's remoted and it's just an ATM teller that you drove up to, not a physical ATM, I mean your device is just an ATM and the bank is somewhere online, or your bank is actually in your device, it doesn't really make a difference. The actual infrastructure of your bank is your device. And so we need to build the silicon and mortar infrastructure of the banking system for Bitcoin.
All right, I'll use that.
Very good.
Very good. Thank you for your time. Any more questions? And if not, we'll close out and ready for the next panel. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.